All right, so yeah, this is Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. I'm going to start with chapter one. Uh, Chapter one is the hearth and the salamander. I've got a nice fireplace streaming in the call too. If you guys want to hop into that and have some background noise. It was a pleasure to burn. It was a special pleasure to see things eaten, to see things blackened and changed. With the brass nozzle in his fists, with this great python spitting its venomous kerosene upon the world. The blood pounded in his head, and in his hands were the hands of some amazing conductor playing all the symphonies of blazing and burning to bring down the tatters and charcoal ruins of history. With his symbolic helmet numbered 451 on his stolid head, and his eyes all orange flame, with the thought of what came next, he flickered the igniter, and the house jumped up in a gorging fire that burned the evening sky red and yellow and black. He strode in a swarm of fireflies. He wanted above all, like the old joke, to shovel marshmallow on a stick in the furnace, while the flapping pigeon-winged books died on the porch and lawn of the house. While the books went up in sparkling whirls and blew away on a wind turned dark with burning. Montag grinned, the fierce grin of all men singed and driven back by flame. He knew that when he returned to the firehouse, he might wink at himself, a minstrel man, burnt corked in the mirror. Later, going to sleep, he would feel the fiery smile still gripped by his face muscles in the dark. It never went away, that smile. It never ever went away, as long as he remembered. He hung up his black beetle-colored helmet and shined it. He hung his flame-proof jacket neatly. He showered luxuriously, and then, whistling, hands in pockets, walked across the upper floor of the fire station, and fell down the hole. At the last moment when disaster seemed positive, he pulled his hands from his pockets and broke his fall by grasping the golden pole. He slid to a squeaking halt, the heels 1 inch from the concrete floor downstairs. He walked out of the fire station and along the midnight street toward the subway, where the silent air-propelled train slid soundlessly down its lubricated flue in the earth and let him out with a great puff of warm air onto the cream-tiled escalator rising to the suburb. Whistling, he led the escalator waft him into the still night air. He walked toward the corner, thinking little at all about nothing in particular. Before he reached the corner, however, he slowed as if a wind had sprung up from nowhere, as if someone had called his name. The last few nights he had had the most uncertain feelings about the sidewalk just around the corner here, moving in the starlight toward his house. He had felt that a moment prior to his making the turn, someone had been there. The air seemed charged with a special calm, as if someone had waited there, quietly, and only a moment before he came, simply turned to a shadow and let him through. Perhaps his nose detected a faint perfume. Perhaps the skin on the backs of his hands, on his face, felt the temperature rise at this one spot where a person's standing might raise the immediate atmosphere 10 degrees for an instant. There was no understanding it. Each time he made the turn, he saw only the white, unused, buckling sidewalk, with perhaps, on one night, something vanishing swiftly across a lawn before he could focus his eyes or speak. But now tonight, he slowed almost to a stop, his inner mind reaching out to turn the corner for him. Had heard the faintest whisper. Breathing? Or was it the atmosphere compressed merely by someone standing very quietly there, waiting? He turned the corner. The autumn leaves blew over the moonlit pavement in such a way as to make the girl who was moving there seem fixed to a sliding walk, letting the motion of the wind and the leaves carry her forward. Her head was half bent to watch her shoes stir the circling leaves. Her face was slender and milk-white, and in it was a kind of gentle hunger that touched over everything with tireless curiosity. It was a look, almost, of pale surprise. The dark eyes were so fixed to the world, that no move escaped them. Her dress was white, and it whispered. He almost thought he heard the motion of her hands as she walked, and the infinitely small sound now, the white stir of her face turning when she discovered she was a moment away from a man who stood in the middle of the pavement waiting. The trees overhead made a great sound of letting down their dry rain. The girl stopped and looked as if she might pull back in surprise, but instead stood regarding Montague with eyes so dark and shining and alive that he felt he had something quite wonderful. But he knew his mouth had only moved to say hello, and then when she seemed hypnotized by the salamander on his arm and the phoenix disk on his chest, he spoke again. "Of course," he said. "You're our new neighbor, aren't you? And you must be—" She raised her eyes from his professional symbols. "The firemen." Her voice trailed off. "How oddly you say that. I'd have known it with my eyes shut," she said slowly. "What, the smell of kerosene? My wife always complains," he laughed. "You never wash it off completely." "No, you don't," she said in awe. He felt she was walking in a circle about him, turning him end for end, shaking him quietly, and emptying his pockets without once moving herself. "Kerosene," he said, because the silence had lengthened, "is nothing but perfume to me." "Does it seem like that, really?" "Of course. Why not?" She gave herself time to think of it. "I don't know." She turned to face the sidewalk, going toward their homes. "Do you mind if I walk back with you? I'm Clarice McClellan." "Clarice. Guy Montague. Come along. What are you doing out so late wandering around? How old are you?" They walked in the warm, cool blowing night on the silvered pavement, and there was the faintest breath of fresh apricots and strawberries in the air. And he looked around and realized this was quite impossible, so late in the year. There was only the girl walking with him now, her face bright as snow in the moonlight, and he knew she was working his questions around, seeking the best answers she could possibly give. "Well," she said, "I'm 17 and I'm crazy. My uncle says the two always go together. When people ask your age," he said, "always say 17. Wait. Sorry about that. When people ask your age," he said, "always say 17 and insane. Isn't this a nice time of night to walk? I like to smell things and look at things, and sometimes stay up all night, walking and watch the sunrise." They walked on again in silence, and finally she said, thoughtfully, "You know, I'm not afraid of you at all." He was surprised. "Why should you be?" "So many people are. Afraid of firemen, I mean. But you're just a man, after all." He saw himself in her eyes, suspended in two shining drops of bright water. Himself dark and tiny, in fine detail, the lines about his mouth, everything there, as if her eyes were two miraculous bits of violet amber that might capture and hold him intact. Her face, turned to him now, was fragile milk crystal with a soft and constant light in it. It was not the hysterical light of electricity, but what? But the strangely comfortable and rare and gently flattering light of the candle. One time, as a child in a power failure, his mother had found and lit a last candle, and there had been a brief hour of rediscovery, of such illumination that space lost its vast dimensions and drew comfortably around them, and they, mother and son, alone, transformed, hoping that the power might not come on again too soon. And then Clarice McClellan said, "Do you mind if I ask how long you worked at being a fireman?" "Since I was 20, 10 years ago." "Do you ever read any of the books you burn?" He laughed. "That's against the law." "Okay, of course." "Oh, of course. It's fine work. Monday burn Millet, Wednesday Whitman, Friday Faulkner. Burn 'em to ashes, then burn the ashes. That's our official slogan." They walked still further, and the girl said, "Is it true that long ago firemen put fires out instead of going to start them?" "No. Houses have always been fireproof. Take my word for it." "Strange. I heard once that a long time ago houses used to burn by accident and they needed firemen to stop the flames." He laughed. She glanced quickly over. Why are you laughing? I don't know. He started to laugh again and stopped. Why? You laugh when I haven't been funny and you answer right off. You never stop to think what I've asked you. He stopped walking. You are an odd one, he said, looking at her. Haven't you any respect? I don't mean to be insulting, it's just I love to watch people too much, I guess. Well, doesn't this mean anything to you? He tapped the numerals 451 stitched on his charcoal sleeve. Yes, she whispered. She increased her pace. Have you ever watched the jet cars racing on the boulevards down that way? You're changing the subject. I sometimes think drivers don't know what grass is or flowers because they never see them slowly, she said. If you showed a driver a green blur, oh yes, he'd say that's grass. A pink blur? That's a rose garden. White blurs are houses. Brown blurs are cows. My uncle drove slowly on a highway once. He drove 40 miles an hour and they jailed him for 2 days. Isn't that funny? And sad, too? You think too many things, said Montag, uneasily. I rarely watch the parlor walls or go to races or fun parks, so I've lots of time for crazy thoughts, I guess. Have you seen the 200-foot-long billboards in the country beyond town? Did you know that once billboards were only 20 feet long, but cars started rushing by so quickly they had to stretch the advertising out so it would last? I didn't know that, Montag laughed abruptly. But I know something else you don't. There's dew on the grass in the morning. He suddenly couldn't remember if he had known this or not, and it made him quite irritable. And if you look, she nodded at the sky. There's a man in the moon. He hadn't looked for a long time. They walked the rest of the way in silence, hers thoughtful, his a kind of clenching and uncomfortable silence in which he shot her accusing glances. When they reached her house, all its lights were blazing. What's going on? Montag had rarely seen that many house lights. Oh, just my mother and father and uncle sitting around talking. It's like being a pedestrian, only rarer. My uncle was arrested another time. Did I tell you? For being a pedestrian. Oh, we're most peculiar. But what do you talk about? She laughed at this. Good night. She started up her walk. Then she seemed to remember something and came back to look at him with wonder and curiosity. Are you happy? She said. Am I what? He cried. But she was gone, running in the moonlight. Her front door shut gently. Happy? Of all the nonsense. He stopped laughing. He put his hand into the glove hole of his front door and let it know his touch. The front door slid open. Of course I'm happy. What does she think? What does she think? I'm not? He asked the quiet rooms. He stood looking up at the ventilator grill in the hall and suddenly remembered that something lay hidden behind the grill. Something that seemed to peer down at him now. He moved his eyes quickly away. What a strange meeting on a strange night. He remembered nothing like it save one afternoon a year ago when he had met an old man in the park and they had talked. Montag shook his head. He looked at a blank wall. The girl's face was there, really quite beautiful in memory. Astonishing, in fact. She had a very thin face like the dial of a small clock, seen faintly in a dark room in the middle of a night, when you waken to see the time and see the clock telling you the hour and the minute and the second, with a white silence and a glowing. All certainty and knowing what it has to tell of the night passing swiftly on toward further darknesses, but moving also toward a new sun. What? Asked Montag of that other self. The subconscious idiot that ran babbling at times, quite independent of will, habit, and conscience. He glanced back at the wall. How like a mirror, too, her face. Impossible. For how many people did you know that refracted your own light to you? People were more often, he searched for a smile, found one in his work. Torches, blazing away until they whiffed out. How rarely did other people's faces take of you and throw back to you your own expression, your own innermost trembling thought. What incredible power of identification the girl had. She was like the eager watcher of a marionette show, anticipating each flicker of an eyelid, each gesture of his hand, each flick of a finger, the moment before it began. How long had they walked together? 3 minutes? 5? Yet how large that time seemed now. How immense a figure she was on the stage before him. What a shadow she threw on the wall with her slender body. He felt that if his eye itched, she might blink, and if the muscles of his jaws stretched imperceptibly, she would yawn long before he would. Why, he thought, not not that I think of it. Now that I think of it, she almost seemed to be waiting for me there, in the street, so damned late at night. He opened the bedroom door. It was like coming into the cold marbled room of a mausoleum after the moon has set. Complete darkness. Not a hint of the silver world outside. The windows tightly shut. The chamber of a tomb world where no sound from the great city could penetrate. The room was not empty. He listened. The little mosquito delicate dancing hum in the air. The electrical murmur of a hidden wasp snug in its special pink warm nest. The music was almost loud enough so he could follow the tune. He felt his smile slide away, melt, fold over and down on itself like a tallow skin, like the stuff of a fantastic candle burning too long and now collapsing and now blown out. Darkness. He was not happy. He was not happy. He said the words to himself. He recognized this as the true state of affairs. He wore his happiness like a mask, and the girl had run off across the lawn with the mask, and there was no way of going to knock on her door and ask for it back. Without turning on the light, he imagined how this room would look. His wife stretched on the bed, uncovered and cold, like a body displayed on the lid of a tomb, her eyes fixed to the ceiling by invisible threads of steel, immovable. And in her ears the little seashells, the thimble radios tamped tight, and an electronic ocean of sound, of music and talk coming in on the shore of her unsleeping mind. The room was indeed empty. Every night the waves came in and bore her off on their great tides of sound, floating her, wide-eyed, toward morning. There had been no night in the last 2 years that Mildred had not swum that sea, had not gladly gone down in it for the 3rd time. The room was cold, but nonetheless he felt he could not breathe. He did not wish to open the drapes and open the French windows, for he did not want the moon to come into the room. So, with the feeling of a man who will die in the next hour or for lack of air, he felt his way toward his open, separate, and therefore cold bed. An instant before his foot hit the object on the floor, he knew he would hit such an object. It was not unlike the feeling he had experienced before turning the corner and almost knocking the girl down. His foot sending vibrations ahead, received back echoes of the small barrier across its path, even as the foot swung. His foot kicked. The object gave a dull clink and slid off in darkness. He stood very straight and listened to the person on the dark bed in the completely featureless night. The breath coming out the nostrils was so faint it stirred only the furthest fringes of life, a small leaf, a black feather, a single fiber of hair. He still did not want outside light. He pulled out his igniter, felt the salamander etched on its silver disc, gave it a flick. 2 moonstones looked up at him in the light of his small handheld fire. 2 pale moonstones, buried in a creek of clear water over which the life of the world ran, not touching them. Mildred! Her face was like a snow-covered island upon which rain might fall, but it felt no rain. Over which clouds might pass their moving shadows, but she felt no shadow. There was only the singing of the thimble wasps in her tamped-shut ears, and her eyes all glass, and breath going in and out, softly, faintly, in and out her nostrils, and her not caring whether it came or went or came. The object he had sent tumbling with his foot now glinted under the edge of his own bed. The small crystal bottle of sleeping tablets, which earlier today had been filled with 30 capsules, and which now lay uncapped and empty in the light of the tiny flare. As he stood there, the sky over the house screamed. There was a tremendous ripping sound, as if two giant hands had torn 10,000 miles of black linen down the seam. Montag was cut in half. He felt his chest chopped down and split apart. The jet bombers going over, going over, going over. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. 6 of them, 9 of them, 12 of them. One and one and one, and another and another and another, did all the screaming for him. He opened his mouth and let their shriek come down and out between his bared teeth. The house shook. The flare went out in his hand. The moonstones vanished. He felt his hand plunge toward the telephone. The jets were gone. He felt his lips move, brushing the mouthpiece of the phone. Emergency hospital, a terrible whisper. He felt that the stars had been pulverized by the sound of the black jets, and that in the morning the earth would be covered with their dust like a strange snow. That was his idiot thought, as he stood shivering in the dark and let his lips go on moving and moving. They had this machine. They had two machines, really. One of them slid down into your stomach like a black cobra down an echoing well, looking for all the old water and the old time gathered there. It drank up the green matter that flowed to the top in a slow boil. Did it drink of the darkness? Did it suck out all the poisons accumulated with the years? It fed in silence, with an occasional sound of inner suffocating and blind searching. It had an eye. The impersonal operator of the machine could, by wearing a special optic helmet, gaze into the soul of the person whom he was pumping out. What did the eye see? He did not say. He saw but did not see what the eye saw. The entire operation was not unlike the digging of a trench in one's yard. The woman on the bed was no more than a hard stratum of marble they had reached. Go on, anyway. Shove the bore down. Slush up the emptiness, if such a thing could be brought out in the throb of the suction snake. The operator stood, smoking a cigarette. The other machine was working too. The other machine, operated by an equally impersonal fellow in non-stainable reddish-brown coveralls. This machine pumped all of the blood from the body and replaced it with fresh blood and serum. "Gotta clean 'em out both ways," said the operator, standing over the silent woman. "No use getting the stomach if you don't clean the blood. Leave that stuff in the blood and the blood hits the brain like a mallet. Bang! A couple thousand times and the brain just gives up. Just quits." "Stop it," said Montag. "I was just saying," said the operator. "Are you done?" said Montag. They shut the machines up tight. "We're done." His anger did not even touch them. They stood with the cigarette smoke curling around their noses and into their eyes without making them blink or squint. "It's $50. First, why don't you tell me if she'll be all right?" "Sure, she'll be okay. We got all the mean stuff right in our suitcase here. You can't get at her now. As I said, you take out the old and you put in the new and you're all right. You're okay. Neither of you's an MD. Why didn't they send an MD from emergency? Hell!" The operator's cigarette moved on his lip. "We get these cases 9 or 10 a night. Got so many, starting a few years ago, we had the special machines built. With the optical lens, of course, that was new. The rest is ancient. You don't need an MD, case like this. All you need is 2 handymen. Clean up the problem in half an hour. Look." He started for the door. "We gotta go. Just had another call on the old ear thimble. 10 blocks from here. Someone else jumped off the cap of a pillbox. Call if you need us again. Keep her quiet. We got a contraceptive in her. She'll wake up hungry. So long." And the men with the cigarettes in their straight-line mouths, the men with the eyes of puff adders, took up their load of machine and tube, their case of liquid melancholy, and the slow, dark sludge of nameless stuff, and strolled out the door. Montag sank down into a chair and looked at this woman. Her eyes were closed now, gently, and he put out his hand to feel the warmness of breath on his palm. "Mildred," he said at last. Do you guys want me to keep reading, or do you want to stop and like discuss? That's a 30-minute mark.
I'm cool with discussing, but I mean, it's whatever the group decides.
Yeah, I'm also good with discussing.
Also good with chatting right now too.
Okay, I mean, was everybody like following along all right? Everything sound
Yeah,
okay?
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah,
Yes.
it sounded good. I feel like I was following along good. I mean, me personally, I feel like, and I know this might not even be possible in Discord or anything like that, but like somehow if there are like the words going with it, like somehow, I don't know, or maybe I just need to get the book and just follow it in the book too. But I was able
Oh,
to still
dude.
follow.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess I forgot to mention there's also like a PDF version online. I think I sent a link to that somewhere. But do you think it would be helpful for me to actually scroll, like share the screen and scroll?
Yes, yes, that's what
oh
I'm
yeah,
saying. Like like in the Discord like that, I feel like would be very very beneficial to the book reading. I mean, yeah, I mean it'd be cool. I mean, if we could like, having that PDF that you're talking about, but like it would be awesome to just have it like right there on the screen that it's like going with what you're reading here in Discord.
That's a good idea. I think I'm gonna try
Yeah.
that. I have it bookmarked actually. Anybody else have any thoughts?
it's great so far. This is my first read, and I see why it's acclaimed.
Yeah, I
Sweet.
enjoyed it. Um, I mean, we can start. I'm not trying to like own it, but or any of it, but I mean, I could talk about like some of the similarities that I can draw from it, the
Okay, yeah, yeah.
parallels.
Go ahead. Open discussion.
Um, All right. Like one of the big ones that was, I mean, to me, pretty glaring and obvious was about the salamander tattoo and the phoenix symbol on his chest. And so, like one, like and seems very, talking about like Nazis and the salamander tattoo. Um, well, particularly the phoenix symbol on his chest. The whole thing about phoenixes is they, they burn and then they rise in the ashes. And there's like a lot of people that say that whole big eagle symbol that the Nazis have isn't really a eagle. Really, it's a phoenix. And I thought that was the whole point of the Nazis was it was from Germany being, crushed in World War I, and that they were supposed to be rising. And then especially with the salamander tattoo being on his or symbol being on his shoulder, like that's where the swastika was. And then also later it talked about the salamander being on his lighter, and then a lot of military people and Nazis kept they had their military symbol on their lighters, so it'd be like a swastika on the lighter.
Oh, yeah, they
Also, I
put that
saw that
symbol on everything.
yeah, oh yeah, it was everywhere. It's crazy. Also, one thing that I liked a lot was it seemed like uh, like uh, Clarice is coming off as like innocent and pure, kind of, but she's also realizing the disaster that she lives in. And I think that was really interesting is how he talked about how he saw his face in her like pure white, in her pure white face, and I think that it was him seeing his ashen, dark and face from burning all these books and disgusting in her light face. So that was a couple things.
Nice. Yeah.
Uh,
Anybody else have anything?
sure. I found it like I don't know if this is a style going through or if this is the character that's going to be followed, but it seems like the narrator projects a lot of I'm forgetting the character's name, but all of his emotions and thoughts onto other things in the world, uh, like Clarice and like the Jets going up. I thought that was a really interesting choice. It's kind of like the psychological concept of projecting. Maybe he has a conscience, and this is his way of like rationalizing the world.
I, I totally agree with that. To me, what I was picking up on personally is that he has some form of PTSD. That's what it seemed like to me. I think that that's what the like pills under the bed were alluding to, as well. It almost seemed like he was having flashbacks with the jet streams going over and overhead.
So, I think it was actually his wife who, the pills were empty, and they like there was those guys that came over that like weren't MDs or whatever, and they were like they had to pump his wife's stomach, and because she had jumped off of the cap of a pill bottle, so she had just like tried to overdose herself while she was listening to these ocean sounds in her little um, Bluetooth uh, earbuds, basically, which I don't think existed whenever this book was published.
Yeah.
Yeah, they use
Yeah.
like fumble in the book. They use like fumbles, but I appreciate it because that's where I started getting lost. Is kind of when it brought her in the situation. I was getting kind of confused. So
Yeah, so
okay, I understand.
yeah, it's kind of like it's just showing like Montag, the main character so far, the firefighter guy. It's showing that he's just getting off work. It's late. He's working all the time. He meets this girl who's like completely opposite side of the community that he's in. It seems upon first glance. Goes home, finds his wife just tried to um, unalive herself, and you know when that happens, he just has this mental falling out, and he's hearing all these planes going overhead, all this chaos. Um, Thankfully, he gets these guys over there in time to pump her stomach and completely swap out her blood or her whole circulatory system, and um, and it's still leaving like a bitter taste. Um, and honestly, I'm like, this is actually as far as I've read in the book already, and feels like this isn't a first for him.
Yeah, and I mean now picking up from more what you're saying, and I appreciate you explaining it better than what I was comprehending from the reading. But it almost seems like it raises the question: why is she the way that she is? Why is it that she's so determined to try that with on herself? Like what happened? What's her history too? And so yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Sweet.
I would say another uh so she was listening to it was just like ocean sounds and like the Bluetooth things.
Yeah, so she had those it was um he talked about the Bluetooth earbuds like they were shells, like ocean shells plunged in her ears, but it's I think it actually mentioned that she was listening to like ocean sounds to like guide her into oblivion when she was
Mm.
unaliving herself. Um, but yeah, sorry, I just completely forgot the question. What were you saying?
No, wasn't a great question.
No,
But
I I forgot. um,
what about you, Milk and Cereal? I know you said you've already read it before, but what you got to say?
Oh no, I haven't read Fahrenheit for 451 yet.
Oh,
But I read the other book. Forgetting you now. That was that the other book club book.
1984.
Yeah, no, yeah, 1984. Yeah. Um, yeah, I think it's interesting. So, how these simple questions that Clarice is asking are just challenging Montag's like deeply ingrained beliefs. And he's just having, I don't even know, he's having like a meltdown internally about it, it seems like, or he's like starting to, like, to just simple questions about like his profession and like, is that, really what the history of firefighting was? And I don't know, like it's like breaking down his, or it's starting to break down, it seems like it's starting to break down his like sense of self. Like he starts off with like saying how kerosene is like perfume,
oh
and now he's
yeah,
like, wait, he's like, am I actually really happy? Like, I'm not really happy. So,
his
I'm
internal
just curious.
dialogue.
Yeah, he's very like cerebral. So his internal dialogue is like, um, it just seems like it's starting to break down, or he's starting to question himself. So in a way that he, like, it's like sparking consciousness in him, in a way that he hasn't experienced yet in his life. It seems like. Um, so I'm just curious to see how this character like further develops.
And to me, talking about like the happiness aspect of it, from what I feel like I picked up on was that I mean, obviously the guy his one of his internal battles, like you're saying, is like, is am I happy really?
Yeah.
And then that was brought up by that Clarice, and
Mhm.
it kind of sort of very hinted alluded to that they live in two different worlds. Clarice and
Hmm.
Montauk live in two different worlds. And then Clarice was the one asking Montauk that question, "Are you happy?" But then also, I feel like it mentioned something about like Clarice going back to her like area, kind of, and that there was her family there. It's almost alluding to like her being happy, even though allegedly maybe we'll have to see if she's living in like a way shittier life, in a way shittier uh, has a way shittier living circumstance than he does, but she's still happier than him. So maybe we'll see.
Hmm.
Sweet.
Yeah, it's like Montauk is really proud of his job of burning books, and then Clarice just comes on. And she's like, cool, like not really respecting that necessarily, and is just like
Yeah.
questioning him in a way that I don't know. It's
In a way that no one else
uh
has done before, because it seems
yeah,
like everyone else. Sorry to like interject, but like yeah,
yeah,
like probably his whole community, his whole life up to this point is like, yeah, go off and be a firefighter. Do your country's duty, or your duty to your
yeah,
country, and burn the bad books. You're doing a great job.
right,
Here's all these
right, yeah, like
medals, and it's like
right.
this little girl is just like, are you really happy? Like, do you
She's
like
like not
burning these
impressed.
books? Like, do you actually read
Yeah,
any of them? Like,
yeah.
so
Like, what
get
are you actually doing? Like,
yeah,
are you aware of what you're actually doing?
asking the
Speak,
important questions.
Yeah.
and speaking of that, like the burning of the books and all that kind of stuff is like I love one thing that I hope I'm not like loose associationing, but I feel like it's very the fact that Clarice mentioned to him like I was once told that firemen put out fires, not caused them, and
Hmm.
that houses used to burn. And he's like, bullshit, no way.
Yeah,
And
I
that
know.
and that
Yeah,
that's like showing how
Crazy.
how propagandized he really is.
Yeah.
Like he believes it. He's like, and it's like showing like, and basically they're living in this like stone cold, very industrial shithole. Like like everything, it's all
dystopia.
it's all yeah, dystopian, like brick,
Hmm.
everything. There's no way a house can burn down. But like apparently where she's from, or she's heard stories of times past where homes and buildings were made of wood, and he's like,
Hmm.
that's bullshit. And the only reason he's saying that's bullshit is because he's already so subject to the propaganda. Like, no, this is the reality, what we're living in. It's all brick, it's all concrete, it's all shit.
Hmm. Yeah, that part of the reading stuck out to me because I live in California. I was just like,
Oh my gosh, really?
yeah, yeah. So there's fires that happen every year, but it just really stuck out to me of like, wow, I can't even imagine a future where someone would believe something like that. Like, I don't know, it was just really very interesting part of the story so far.
What about you, AOI again? What do you think? What'd you get? What stuck out to
I'm
you?
Yeah, I'm really interested in what's behind the grate because it seems like that's kind of like the psychological break for him because while he could ignore all the questions or try to, it seems he looked away from the grate because he knows what's behind it. So I'm wondering what's behind it.
Mm.
That's interesting for sure.
Thank you for sharing, guys. Do we want to try to continue reading, or try to do a little bit more discussion, or what's everybody's plan here? Or like, what do you guys want to do?
I mean, I'm down for whatever, but I mean, I feel like it's solid for at least for four people. If we had 30 minutes of reading, and then roughly we're about at 15 minutes of discussion. But hopefully maybe we'll get more people join. But if we want to keep reading, I'm down too. I don't care.
Yeah, I'm feeling kind of tired, so I can continue like offline, or but I'd vote for stopping for now.
Yeah.
I think this was actually a pretty good um, like length of a session, honestly. Um,
Yeah.
it felt organic. It felt like we found a nice stopping point, and then we had a discussion where everyone had a chance to say something.
Yeah.
Um, So yeah, maybe it is actually okay to call it here.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and then so yeah, I completely agree with y'all. Like, and that was a great discussion. It was an enjoyable read. For me personally though, and if it can't happen, that's okay. I can try pulling it up somewhere else. But if it was something like the technological aspect of it, would be pulling up the book straight up, like how you pull up the fireplace. If there was a way to pull up the book, yeah, like that. If
Yeah, I
you,
think it actually would work. Yeah, I could just do this next time, and I have a PDF right here, so
that'd be great.
I can actually highlight the words too. I don't know if that's like something that I'll do, but can you see the highlighting?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I can. But honestly, the
A
highlighting,
little
at
harder
least
to read.
that kind of highlighting is a little bit harder to read. But the yellow, if there's like just some kind of standard yellow, that'd probably be easier.
Okay.
Maybe. That was
Um,
great, man. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. I'm looking forward to the future.
Sweet.
Yeah, likewise.
Um,
So
Thank you
much.
so much.
so tomorrow, there is another reading. It's at 5 p.m. Central Time and 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Um, we don't actually have a book picked
For
out
this
yet,
book?
so I don't
Or
know. Not this book, no. It's
oh,
a different reader with a different book. They've mentioned a few different titles, um, but I'm gonna talk to them tonight. Hopefully, if I can get in touch with them and figure out what kind of book they're gonna read, and we'll have a post in the book club readings forum for everyone to see. So, but thank you guys so much for attending. Um, it's a little bit less of a turnout than I anticipated, but it's still great to have people show up and listen. Um, yeah, and I'm glad that you guys think it went well enough, and I hope you guys can show up again. Next time I'll be reading this book will be Friday, same time, and then next time I will definitely have a PDF scrolling so that you guys can follow along. Um,
Awesome.
all
Thank you
right.
so much.
Thank you so much. Sounds great.
Thank
yeah,
you. Y'all have a great night.
Thank
You
you.
too.
have a good
Good
one.
night, everyone.